to Soundtrack Talk, my podcast where I talk about games and music and soundtracks. Here today with me is my friend Nick. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm Jade's friend.
Great
gamer.
introduction.
Great introduction.
So yeah, today we're going to be talking about Life is Strange. Now, I haven't actually played this game, but I still wanted to talk about the music, so Nick has played this game. So could you give us a quick introduction and overview of what the game actually is?
Definitely do that. So Life is Strange is a story-based game where you play as Max, who's an 18-year-old woman attending university, and she discovers she can rewind time. This game is very heavily driven by the choices you make, so the different choices you make will have different outcomes. And it's 5 episodes long, so each episode has a definite start and finish and are their own separate arc, but they form a whole story.
So when I asked you about this podcast and what game you'd like to pick, so what made you pick Life is Strange?
When I talked to you about this first, I think there's probably about 10-15 seconds or so between you saying, oh, what game would you like to talk about? And I was just like, Life is Strange, type that out as quickly as possible. I love the music in Life is Strange. As it happens, I had recently been playing Life is Strange, one of the more modern ones that came out last year. So I was very excited to talk about an older version of Life is Strange, which is one of my favorite games. And the music in it is very, I think, unique for a lot of games in that the soundtrack is very eclectic and all the songs, they're not songs I would tend to listen to myself. They're not songs I would ever add to my Spotify playlist, except for having played this game. And having played this game, I go, I now love these songs.
Yeah.
It's
good when a game does that.
It's a good sign when a game can make you like a song that you would otherwise not like.
Definitely. I experienced that in Beat Saber as well.
Very much so. I think there's some times when I'm playing Beat Saber, or when I'm listening to a song that would have been on Beat Saber, and I'm just visualizing the notes in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm just, why am I pretending I'm waving around sticks when I'm not even playing the game?
Honestly, all of the default songs in Beat Saber are just not things that I would listen to.
No, they're not my style at all.
Nope. But yeah, anyway, got a bit off topic immediately within the first 3 minutes. Very cool. That's okay. So yeah, as a bit of an experiment, since I haven't played the game, I listened to the entire soundtrack, and I'm going to provide my thoughts on sort of everything, having not played the game. And I don't know, because since I haven't played this game, probably what I'm all about to say is completely wrong, and I might be analysing the wrong bits too deeply, or not analysing the important bits enough. So
I think it's helpful to have a sort of a blind approach, and then someone who's already played the game, and you can contrast the two. Could be helpful.
Yeah, so that's what I was hoping we'd do today. So, should I begin talking about what I thought of the soundtrack, having not played the game?
Shoot.
Okay, so as I started listening to the soundtrack, I listened first to the background music soundtrack that wasn't actually the songs that you hear, because the soundtrack is a mixture of songs by real bands and just ambient background noise. So, as I was listening to the soundtrack, the first thing I noticed was that it's extremely guitar heavy. In episode 1, track 1 is just soft guitar chords, and I don't know, I think it was the main menu theme. I don't know, but it sort of felt like the main menu theme, and it set the scene for the game. I noticed that throughout the whole soundtrack, it's mainly guitar, piano, electronics, and the odd held string chords in the backgrounds, which are not prominent at all, but they are there.
Very string heavy, that's for sure. There's no percussion, there's no drums,
nothing like that yet.
Almost entirely strings.
Yeah. In the beginning, with this guitar music, I felt like the chord movements were very even. Each bar or two is a change of chord, and the harmonic rhythm doesn't really change that much. So the chords keep changing with the same amount of time in between them. They don't really have a bunch of fast chord changes and a bunch of slow chord changes. So yeah, in track 1, which I think is the main menu theme. I really like hearing the like a raw guitar sound. You know, when you can hear the guitarist's fingers slide between the frets and things like that. I really like that.
It's very different from sort of, a fully structured song that would be on Spotify. It feels sort of homely, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really does. It sort of felt really warming and welcoming.
Yeah.
I think. In track 2, a quick disclaimer. I talk through the whole of episode 1, but then I'm gonna fast track through episode 2 to 5 because otherwise this will take way too long. So
Right, okay.
In track 2, I noticed that there are reverse notes effects. So when a note starts off quiet and then gets loud and then gets cut off, it's usually made by playing the note in a piano or something, or a synth, and then reversing it so the attack comes at the end. I heard some of those, and it's very soft and atmospheric in contrast to the track 1. And it still sort of sounds like the intro. What I thought could be happening here in the game, I have no idea. But could it be introducing a character? Like maybe the main character?
Difficult for me to say. I do find that a lot of the times there's that almost like ringing in your ears noise.
That's what I was
which
noticing.
Is how track 2 sort of starts. It's almost like approaching white noise.
Yeah.
But not quite there. It's just sort of like a soft ringing in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's almost borderline disorientating.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's probably intentional. I think because it's a very confusing game. The game isn't, it's not difficult by any means. It's a very simple game to play. It's a walking simulator essentially, but there's a lot of twists and turns with the characters, which I think is it's represented well in the music.
For sure. In the next track, it's called Blackwell Academy, and given the name, I thought that maybe in the game here we're introduced to a sort of school or study environment. The track to me just sounds like a more upbeat version of the menu music.
I think a lot of the background tracks are sort of rehashing the menu music in a way, and it's the same instruments.
That's what I noticed that towards the end. I started really noticing it and thinking back to the things that I heard at the beginning. I sort of came to my little own conclusion about the overview of the music, but I'll get to that.
Right, okay.
Anyway, in track 4 I noticed that there's like a prominent bass line. I wasn't sure about this because it wasn't something that we'd heard before in the game, but it got me thinking, since it's introducing a new instrument, I thought maybe it could be introducing another character in a game, like maybe one of the other, like the important NPCs is introduced at this point.
I tend to find that most of these tracks here are sort of background music that might not necessarily have a full correlation to the entire story. Usually, if there is some sort of scene where you're not actually in control, you're just watching when you're watching a cutscene, they often have bigger songs played, more important lyrical songs that are a couple of minutes long that aren't just sort of background music for the game. These tracks are usually, I don't know, you're walking around outside in the courtyard and there'll be a little bit of music just to fill in the silence.
Fair enough. So I think the rest of episode 1 kind of goes on like this. There's tracks where there's guitar based, there's tracks where there's a little bit of piano, and there's tracks where you can hear the electronic sort of effects coming in, like the reverse notes and heavy reverberation and things like that. I want to talk about one thing that I noticed after listening to the entire soundtrack. I noticed that there's almost 2 types of background music. There's the one type where it's the guitar, so the guitar chords, the slow harmonic rhythm, it's relaxing, relatively upbeat, and I'm assuming this plays at like happy or light or positive moments in the games. And then there's also the second type, which is more like fluid and dark and electronic, but not like upbeat electronic, like wishy-washy sort of electronic, long notes, held notes. I don't really know how to describe it.
There's definitely 2 sides for this game. Sometimes there's scenes where it's not necessarily a jovial, happy, upbeat scene, but it's just more sort of peaceful, gentle.
Yeah.
And I guess the first sort of music you were talking about. Whereas there's definitely other scenes where there's sort of drama going on, where there's big reveals, where there's twists, where they do have a bit more discordant music going on that's a bit, it's not shocking or sort of spooky or anything, it's more just jarring.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I definitely ended up sort of hearing those two types of musics, and one, like any one track, is sort of clearly in one side or the other. So after listening to the entire background music soundtrack and realizing sort of what I noticed and what I thought about the guitar versus the electronic side, I also listened to the songs that are used in the game. And in each episode there's several songs that are used as part of the soundtrack, but not as the background music. Since I haven't played the game, I'm probably not the best to explain. Could you probably give a better explanation, Nick?
So a lot of these songs are also quite guitar heavy, much like the soundtrack. They're full-fledged songs, they have lyrics, and they have, an entire band behind them. And a lot of them, I don't think many of them were created specifically for Life is Strange. These have been cherry-picked out of songs, some of them were made in 2008, so they weren't specifically written for this game. But I think they sort of specifically went out of the way to choose lesser-known indie songs that fit with the game, rather than seeking out a popular name with a big brand and going for that. They could have gone, let's get Imagine Dragons and put on some pop music, whatever. But they chose sort of very indie, local artists who I think do a good job of fitting in with the game's genre. Because the main character, Max, is also quite a bit of a misfit. She's very hipster, as much as I hate the term. And I don't think her music choice reflects the music in the game. If she was listening to rock or disco or punk or whatever, it just wouldn't fit her character.
Yeah. You see, so I feel like so much thought must have gone into this. You say some of the songs were written in 2008. When did the game actually come out, just for reference?
I believe it's 2015, the first Life is Strange.
So yeah, that is, songs from quite a while before the game came out.
Yeah, and these are also songs, some of the songs were reasonably well known, but a lot of the songs were borderline unheard of outside of France, because it was a French company, and it was January 29th, 2015 it was released.
Ah, nice. So yeah, I listened to all the songs in episode 1. So the first song that is on the list that I listened to is called To All of You. And I just noticed, like you said, I think you've already said what I was going to say, but I thought that it was very similar to the rest of the soundtrack because it's guitar heavy and the mood sort of matches. The next song is Crosses. The one thing I did notice, because I watched this one with the music video, and the music video is of a guy in a car, and there are other passengers in the car. So he's in the middle seat in the back, and there's other passengers in the car next to him and in front of him that sort of appear and then disappear. And it just sort of made me feel like it's trying to embody the feeling of having everyone around you but still feeling bored or alone.
I don't want to give away too many spoilers for the game, but I will say that there is a prominent thematic with cars and car crashes that result in a lot of turmoil for the characters.
So I'm onto something with my weird analysis of the music.
Potentially. I mean, it's very hard to gauge because obviously this song was released before the game. So, one could argue it's just happenstance that it happens to do this. But perhaps it was just an exceptionally well-picked song that also happens to reflect the game. I've never actually seen the music video. I wasn't aware there was a music video of that song.
I just got it from the wiki page.
I see. I've only ever sort of played through the game and had the song play as I'm playing the game. But I mean, it could definitely be referencing that.
Yeah, it just sort of has that slightly melancholy feel to it.
But a lot of the songs are melancholy. I think it's definitely, the game is not necessarily a depressing game, but it's far from happy. There's a lot of down points in the game where you sort of feel a bit hopeless. You feel like despair. You feel like, oh, what can you possibly do?
One of the lyrics I noticed was cast some light and it'll be alright. sort of makes me feel like he's, like you just said, what can you possibly do? You just need some light to sort of guide the way.
Again, in one of the later episodes, there's a very important reference to something called the Dark Room. Which,
that's
as you
the
play
name.
the game, you'll discover what that is.
That's the name of episode 4.
That is the name of episode 4. And, I really don't want to spoil too much, but it's important. Mm-hmm. And I think the contrast between light and dark, as you were just pointing out, is quite important. Because one of the characters in the game is sort of quite unstable, mentally unstable, I guess. I don't know if that's a PC term. And you can see, sometimes you flip through like a journal of all his drawings, and you can see him getting sort of a bit crazier and crazier over time, just scribbling all over the place. And one of the things he just scratches all over the place is dark room, dark room, dark room, all over this piece of paper. And obviously, as you play the game, you'll discover out what the answer to the secret is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next song in the game is called Santa Monica Dream. So one thing I noticed is the vocals in this song. So I think there's one female voice and one male voice. The female voice is incredibly high-pitched and soft, and the male voice is also kind of high-pitched, but they sort of blend together so well. And one thing I noticed that the female voice sounds very young, and this could be me completely overanalyzing, but could this be sort of like a reference or representative of one of the characters' like state of mind? Like you said, it could be sort of unstable.
You're talking about her being young, and I think this game definitely has sort of coming of age theme to it, because obviously you're 18, you go into university, you're discovering who you are, and at the beginning of the game, Max definitely doesn't really fit into any sort of group. She's not necessarily a loner, but she's a bit isolated, a bit introverted, and I think as the game progresses, you do sort of see her grow up and find her niche a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's sort of necessarily reflected in the fact that they have a very young voice.
I'm not sure. This is the thing, I always tend to overanalyze, especially as I've not played the game. This is really hard, and I feel like I'm just making complete stabs in the dark. But it's fun.
I mean, carry on. I'm very, it's interesting to see what people think of the songs having not played them, but I've only ever listened to the songs having played the game before. And you definitely get a completely different approach, because it's not really a stab in the dark.
So next is Piano Fire, and I noticed that this one's sort of more rocky than the others so far. There's more jamming, there's more going on, and there's more like drums and stuff as well in the song, which was sort of a stark contrast to the entire rest of the soundtrack that I had listened to at that point.
Yeah, this one is definitely an outlier in the first episode. It definitely has a completely different vibe to it. I believe this is one of the songs that plays. I'm trying to find when this song plays in the game, because this song doesn't sound like a song that Max would listen to. And a lot of the songs that you listen to in the game are very much based around Max's music. Whereas when there's other characters, there's a character Victoria, for instance, and when you're talking to her, there'll be very different. There'll be a bit of pop, a bit of funk, a bit of disco, whatever in the background, and it's nothing like Max's style of music. I believe this is actually a song. So Max has a friend, Chloe, who's very different to Max.
Yeah.
And this is a song that Chloe plays when you're in her room. I think it's a definite distinction between Chloe and Max, the sort of music they listen to. I think it helps sort of distinguish them as two different people.
Yeah, I remember you saying previously that one sort of thing that is quite apparent in this game is that each of the characters has their own sort of music style.
Yeah, I mean, they very much do. There's, I think there's at least 4 or 5 different characters who sort of have their own cemented music theme, I suppose you can say, to them. And just sort of sitting, like, if you just idle in the game, you'll often hear different music. Yeah, each of the characters seem to have their own music theme to them. So Max's will be very soft, very gentle, very slow, lots of strings. Similar to the main soundtrack, which I suppose makes sense because she is the main character, it's her story. Then other characters definitely have different vibes. So Chloe, for instance, is very punk, very rock, has lots of heavy metal clothes, and the music definitely reflects that because she's a completely different character to Max.
Mm-hmm.
And through playing the game, you'll find out that Max and Chloe grew up together,
Mm-hmm.
but then they haven't spoken for about 5 years, and the game begins with their reunion. So it's quite interesting to see sort of the divergent paths that Max and Chloe took, because when they were younger, they were fairly similar. Like they were two peas in a pod. But then when you're playing 5 years in the future, you do notice that they are completely different characters, and one of them has gone off to Seattle and done his business, come back, and is now a bit of an introvert photography student, and the other one is a complete rebel, doing her own thing, always getting in trouble, likes listening to punk music, all that.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost trying to show you the different paths that they could have taken were life to have gone differently.
For sure.
Because this game does revolve a lot around time travel. So there will be quite a lot of moments in the game where you can explore other timelines, I suppose you could say. And in one of them, you do find a scenario where Chloe grew up in a different manner, where certain things didn't happen. And you do see her actually grow up to be a bit like Max, really. A bit dorky, a bit sort of introverted, a bit... she was a very good student. Whereas in reality, she was a terrible student, she got kicked out of school, got addicted to drugs, and it's a completely different approach, sort of viewpoint of her life.
That's really interesting. This is sort of talking about the game a bit, but I really enjoy sort of games that make you think about reality like that. Like if your upbringing was slightly different, you could have been a completely different person.
Yeah, and this game does a very good job of that. And it's a game that I think does it really well, because obviously the ability to rewind time is quite unique to a game that's also about decision making.
Yeah,
because
I
one
don't
would think if you can rewind time, it doesn't matter what your decisions are, you just go back and change the decisions. But I think it's a bit more butterfly effect, where sometimes you do go back in time and change decisions, but you realize, oh, that's actually messed everything up in a completely new way. You can't just keep on going back in time to rectify everything. You can't make everything perfect. If you change one thing, something else goes wrong. And throughout the game, you will notice there are some things that, no matter what choice you make, something's going to go wrong. There's no perfect choice, because if there was, you just rewind and take the perfect choice, happily ever after.
Talking about time travel, actually, one thing I noticed while listening to the next song, Obstacles, it's called, is that I noticed this really distinctive electronic effect of a note sliding, or not even a note, just like an electronic sound that's like repeatedly sliding over and over again. And I was thinking, once again in my over-analysis, this could this represent sort of her discovering her time travel power, and the electronic noises in this song and throughout the rest of the actual background music soundtrack, could this represent that power? And another thing I noticed is, as the song goes on, this sliding electronic noise becomes less and less noticeable. I'm not sure if that could be sort of relating to her sort of getting more comfortable with herself, comfortable with her power. Obviously, I've not played the game, this is complete speculation. But am I sort of getting at the right idea here, or no?
It could be. So this is a song that plays at the end of episode 1.
Yeah.
And most episodes, they start off with some cutscene and some music, and also end similarly with some cutscene and some music. And this song plays when there's a freak snowstorm in the middle of summer.
Oh.
And I think this is a point at which her and Chloe are sort of reuniting and discovering what's going on.
As in the times that they've been apart and sort of catching up?
Yeah, it's at the end of every episode, there's basically some sort of big event that's happening, that's quite shocking. And for instance, at the end of episode 1, it's this freak snowstorm. And quite a lot of the time in the games, it's to do with nature. It's not necessarily global warming happening or anything like that. It's more there's some sort of freaky storm happening, be it a tornado, be it an eclipse when there wasn't an eclipse supposed to be planned, freak snowstorm. Like nature is revolting against itself. And I think it's indicative that the more Max messes with time, nature reacts and says, no, this isn't right. You can't alter time like this because things will happen.
That's really interesting, because I didn't know about this that sort of nature side of the game. I only knew about the time travel because you mentioned it before.
Nature is quite a key element, I think. As the game progresses, in episode 1, everything seems normal. I think there's a lot of animal noises, birds chirping, dogs barking, things like that in the background, which I think definitely helps at times when there isn't music playing. The world still feels alive. It's not complete silence. You are hearing all these noises.
Yep.
And there's quite a few specific points in the game where you can, for instance, save a bird trapped in a house. And if you save the bird, you'll later notice that bird again alive because you saved it, and your character will comment on that and be like, oh, you're the bird that I saved. Whereas if you don't save the bird, obviously the bird isn't there in the future. Because you keep on meddling with time, you do notice a lot of things in nature start to go wrong. To begin with, it'll be strange weather, but then as the game progresses, you'll notice that there's a lot of dead birds on the ground. And sort of it's end of episode 3, you might get a lot of beach whales on the beach. And
that's quite a big event.
Yeah, they are quite big events. It's basically sort of nature telling you there's something wrong.
Stop meddling with time.
Yeah, quite. And the whole premise of the game starts off with you having a vision that there's going to be a tornado that's going to hit the city.
Oh, okay. Foreshadowing.
And it's not really a spoiler because it happens very early.
Because it happens.
And you're trying to stop that happening with your time travel powers.
Makes sense.
But you realize the more and more you meddle with time, the more and more crazy weather phenomenon happen, and you start to add 2 and 2 together. That time travel is what's causing it.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed, I didn't listen to every single track in the game, but I did notice that To All of You comes back later in episode 5, and Santa Monica Dream and Piano Fire comes back in episode 3 and 4 and everything. Are these sort of, when they play in the later episodes, do they sort of reflect back to when they first played?
And I think there's definitely a bit of nostalgia to having them play over again. And you will end up comparing where you were in episode 1 to where you are now in episode 4. And as throughout the episodes, there's a big difference on who the characters are, how they've matured, what they're doing. And I think when you start off in episode 1, you're a bit of oblivious because you don't really know what's happening. You don't know sort of the whole situation. And when you hear this song, it's just a nice, gentle little song. That's what you expect the game to be. Whereas I think when you hear it later, it
sticks in your mind more.
Yeah, it makes you reminisce about how things were a couple of episodes ago. In reality, the game takes place over the course of a couple of weeks, so it's not necessarily that it would be nostalgic for the character, but it's more nostalgic for you who's played this game over a larger amount of time.
Yeah. So it is really noticeable, right, when the same music comes back? Because I know in some games that I've played, the same theme keeps coming back again and again, and I'm not sure if it's because it's not very well fitted to the game or anything like that, or it's not done well enough, but sometimes I don't notice until I sort of play the game again or for a third time, and then I notice the things in the music that sort of have a continuity between the sort of what's going on in the game. So is this in this game, it is noticeable on the first playthrough, right?
I mean, I think it's noticeable that you're hearing a song that's already played, but I don't think there's ever the point where you're thinking, oh my god, they're reusing this song again. I mean, you only hear it twice. It's definitely not a case of oversaturation.
That's good.
I feel like it's a good reuse of the song.
Of course.
And sometimes, if the song plays the first time and it's quite a sad moment, the second it starts playing in the future, you sort of have this feeling that something sad is going to happen. That you sort of associate the song with the feeling of that moment.
Yeah, that's really good. I feel like games that let you sort of feel, like, make you feel proper emotions from just the music, like, it's sort of rare. Like, usually, I don't know, I've played a whole lot of games and a lot of them have really great music, but it doesn't quite tap into your emotional sort of centers as well as this game appears to do. Again, I haven't played it yet.
I think the music is very good at evoking certain emotions. I think that's a big part of why the music fits so well in the game. And I do think other games that aren't necessarily story-driven will just have music in the background to fill up the silence.
Yeah, and those games are, like, the music is still good. Like, it fits the action of what's in the game.
Yeah,
but
there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But it just wouldn't suit this game if they just had a random playlist of songs playing in the background. It just wouldn't work.
I'm still in awe at the fact that, thinking about the amount of effort that must have gone into picking the songs, like trawling back through so many indie artists and so, like, songs from years back, trying to find exact picks.
And these are sort of mostly unknown songs. They weren't big hits before they were chosen for this game. And it's interesting to look at, the songs on YouTube or on Spotify and noticing that the songs I've picked in this are listened to a hell of a lot more than any of the other songs by these artists. Like, it's literally Life is Strange has brought a huge amount of people, millions of views to watch this video, when before it would have been, a couple of thousand.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So after all that analysis of the music by me who hasn't actually played the game, I wanted to ask you if there's anything that I sort of missed, or anything that's sort of like, you need to have the game in front of you to sort of understand it.
And I think it's very hard to get it all, having never played the game before.
Of course, like, I wasn't saying that I was gonna immediately understand all the ins and outs, but what is like the biggest thing that you would miss? Yeah.
Obviously, you know the game's about time travel, so you can make some assumptions with that. But I think there's big things, talking about nature. Nature is a big theme. I think that's very hard. I completely
missed that as well.
And I think it's a lot of indie music, which reflects the main character. And she's not old-fashioned, but for instance, she likes using a Polaroid camera. She's a bit retro, I suppose. And she's very much sort of not in with any of the popular crowds.
Okay.
And I think the music definitely reflects on her. And I think one of the things that this game does really well is the music in the game doesn't feel like you're playing the game and there's just like music overlaid and you're just hearing music while playing the game. It makes the music feel like it's sort of part of the game. Like music is important not just to the viewer but to sort of everyone in the game itself. So one of the very early scenes, I think the song To All of You plays. And this happens when you're in university. Max sticks her earphones in and she walks down the hall and there's a cutscene playing. And there's an audible moment where she sticks her earphones in, everything sort of gets dulled, all the background noises, all the people talking, all the people running to class, they go muffled. And the song plays because she's listening to it in earphones.
Yeah.
And I think it's very good exposition of how, as she's walking down the corridor listening to music, you really do feel like you're the one listening to music as she's walking down the corridor. You don't think, this is just someone walking down the corridor while music plays. It feels like it's you.
It's really immersive in that sense.
Very immersive. I think like the music sort of is part of the world itself.
Yeah.
which I think isn't very common in video games.
No.
And there's also lots and lots of moments where you'll go into someone's room and there'll be a radio playing, and you can just sit and listen to the radio, it's a song on the radio. Or there's even one point where you wake up in the morning and you can choose yourself. You can walk over to the radio and put the radio on to listen to music, and you can strum along with your guitar to the music. And that's all sort of, you can choose to do that. There's nothing forcing you to listen to the music, but it's still enjoyable to make that choice.
Of course.
And there's lots of scenes where you can just sit on a bench, sit on a bed, sit on a wooden stump, and you'll just sit there and listen to music for a couple of minutes and reminisce, and your character will talk. And it's completely unnecessary to, continue the story to do this. But there's a lot of times where you just want to sort of sit down and have a break, listen to some calming music, and, Max will tell you her thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's quite therapeutic in a manner. Do you think that music in video games tends to be underrepresented?
Underrepresented?
Yeah. As in, when someone's talking about a critically acclaimed game, is music often one of the first things they jump to talk about? Do you think it gets the credit it deserves?
I don't think it does, which is partly why I made this podcast. I think, you hear about big games, and it's always the graphics, and then it's always the gameplay mechanics, and then it's the story, and then it's the music. It's always sort of the visual side is sort of really analyzed and really appreciated, and obviously that's not a bad thing. It's great that we can have really immersive games, thinking back to just retro games like the first Zelda or Tetris or Pac-Man. Obviously they're extreme examples, but just how far we've come with graphics is incredible. Playing Half-Life Alyx in VR, that is out of this world for me. And
it's very crazy.
It is very but the thing with music is that it has also progressed that far. Back in the day, it was chiptune, it was 8-bit music, having only a couple of tracks on old consoles, to now there's full orchestras, recording studios, critically acclaimed composers writing all the music. Obviously they were writing the music before as well. I'm just saying the sort of instrumentation has also come a long way, and I think it's sort of not given enough attention, I think. Especially when a game, like you said with this game, it's not just you're playing the game with some noise in the background, it's sort of part of the story. And having a real guitar recording of the background music in this game, sort of, it feels personal, I think.
And I definitely agree that musicians tend to go underrepresented in games. And it's never one of the first things people jump to scream about. I think it's quite rare, because I think Life is Strange is one of the few games that does have a lot of people applauding its choice of music, which is very rare to see. Unless it's a sort of a music-based game like Guitar Hero or like Beat Saber. No one is first to jump and talk about music. It's definitely sort of the last resort thing to talk about. When you look up a review for a video game, it's never talking. It's always about music.
Footnote. The music was good too.
Yeah, and it's just music. Music was sufficient. That is usually what they say.
Music was there.
Yeah. Which obviously I think there are some games where the music isn't crucial to the game, and then it's valid. But you don't need to have a perfect soundtrack to the game if that's not what you're trying to do. If it's just sort of an old style arcade game.
You don't need to have big epic orchestras for for Space Invaders or anything.
Yeah.
Speaking of this, not having the music essential to the game, I feel like Life is Strange would not sound well. Yeah, it would not sound, but it would also play terribly if you played it with the music off, since it's such a big integral part.
Thought. I completely agree with you. I think so. Personally, when I play games, I don't have a similar view. If I'm playing any sort of story-based game, I will have the voice lines, 100%.
Yeah.
Music and SFX, I usually have about 60%.
Mm.
Just because I always like to make sure I can hear what people are saying. And usually the soundtrack isn't so important to me. It's like, as long as it's making sound in the background, that's fine. I don't need to hear it. Whereas Life is Strange, I'm very happy to have the music, 100%. Because I feel like it needs to be. It's important. The music is probably just as important as what the people are saying.
Yeah. I was quite silly back in the day when I first started sort of getting into PC gaming. I played Portal without the music the first time I played it. And like it's still a great game. Like it's a really good game. And then I played it with the music and it sort of takes it to another level. But then again, it wasn't awful without the music. It was just kind of bland and the music added a bit more. But I feel like it still works without it. But I feel like Life is Strange would just straight up not work without the music.
No.
Yeah.
I think music is also one of those things that you don't really appreciate it until it's not there, and then you go, hang on a second, where's this music? The music made the game.
That's how I feel when I play sort of story games that I've played before. If I play them without the music, if I've got like my own music on in the background or something, that's definitely how I feel. Like I can sort of hear it in the background in my head. I know what's supposed to be sounding at that point.
And I think it's very much crucial for story games. There's lots of games where I think I can happily play that muted. Watch a video while I play a turn-based game, not a problem.
Oh yeah, of course.
Whereas I think story games are the games that do require my full attention. It's basically like watching a movie.
Of course, yeah.
You need to pay attention. If you took the music out of a movie, it just wouldn't work.
No,
you need the music. And I think that's what a lot of games are. They're basically movies that you're able to interact with.
I really think that for story games. I really like story games. People sort of make fun of me sometimes and they're like, oh, but they're not real games. But they are. Like, they're a huge genre.
Story games are like, I used to play, like when I was growing up, I used to play a lot of sort of turn-based games, a lot of, hack slashing fools or games where you could literally just play it muted, watch a video on the side and just sort of phase out and just play the game. Whereas story-based games, I feel like I'm just completely gripped looking at the screen.
Exactly.
And they tend to last. They only last 10 hours, something like that. So you're not going to get hundreds of hours out of it. If you're playing Minecraft or something.
It's such an experience, though.
And then there are people who will be like, "Oh, I played this game for 200 hours and it only cost me 30 euros. Think of the efficiency."
But it's not...
you're missing on the point.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not about hours spent.
No.
It's about how it makes you feel.
Exactly. So after all this, I really want to play the game. One last question I was going to ask you is, do you think me having listened to all of this music will ruin the experience of me playing the game for the first time at all?
That's a difficult question. When I first played through the game, after playing through it, I went on Spotify, I went on YouTube to find the songs that played in the game, and I listened to them, and I sort of went, you just get this instant nostalgia of playing the game. It just reminds you instantly of that scene or what they were doing or what was happening. And you just sort of, when you're listening to the song, you're almost just playing through the game again in your mind.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know if having already listened to the songs, you're necessarily going to make that same connection, because now the first time you heard that song wasn't when you were playing this game.
No.
It was just watching it on YouTube.
Maybe so I'll play the game and it will make me nostalgic for watching the soundtrack on YouTube.
Right, exactly. It's not the same thing. I think that having my first introduction to the songs be through the game was actually quite important.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I've ruined it for myself, but on the other hand, I feel like the music in this game is, from what you said and from what I've read online, it's just really well done that it might not even be ruined for me, because standalone the songs that I use are great, but like in conjunction with the gameplay, they're sort of crucially immersive parts of it that it might still make me feel as if I'm listening.
Be ruined.
No, yeah.
I think there's a chance it might not be as amazing as if you're going into it, blind. But
yeah, I'll just have to erase it all from my memory before I play the game. But yeah.
Rewind time.
Yes, exactly. Rewind time. Thank you for talking to me today about this game. It's very interesting.
Happy to do it.
And I'm very, very excited to play the game now. I didn't do this last episode. Doesn't matter. I'm at Soundtrack Talk on most social medias, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You find all the new episodes there. Thank you for listening. I'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.